Hi, everybody, and welcome to What's New in RHEL 9.5. I'm Scott McBrien, your host for today, and we're going to be looking at the feature set and a variety of other things about RHEL 9.5 that are brand new. So let's dive right in. So just as a reminder, our goal at Red Hat, and specifically the RHEL team, is to be your source for safe and reliable Linux innovation that makes your workload successful. We can deploy that anywhere you want it to be, or at least that's what we want to have happen. And then we also serve the larger Red Hat ecosystem, because nobody buys RHEL to have a RHEL system. They buy RHEL to have things run on top of it, including our independent software vendor software and other things. All right, so let's dive right in. Don't forget to mash that like and subscribe button to get more updates as we move on. All right, so in RHEL 9.5, we started to add some technology preview things. We've actually been keeping track of this since the beginning of RHEL 9. A reminder, a technology preview is something that we've added into the product, but is not a fully supported thing. So it works, but we don't offer support, nor do we recommend that customers use it in production yet. So in RHEL 9.4, we added RHEL image mode. RHEL image mode is a way that you can build an operating system image using a container file and then deploy it on either bare metal or virtual machine or as a container. So it's like one build and you can deploy where you want. This is relatively new. As I mentioned, we added it as a tech preview in 9.4, but there were significant improvements made between 9.4 and 9.5, which is not unusual in a rapidly evolving technology. So if you're interested in RHEL image mode, try it out. There's also a lab on lab.redhat.com where you can build your first image mode image and use it. WireGuard VPN is a tech preview in RHEL 9.4 and 9.5, as is GNOME for 64-bit ARM architecture. So these are all things that are in the product today, but are not fully supported. kTLS is a new one. So this is kernel transport layer security. It's an offload for the system for encryption. And I'll provide in the video notes a link to some kernel documentation that goes into a stupid amount of detail on what this is and how it works. We're also tech previewing two processor features, one from Intel called SGX and the other one from AMD called SEV, which is to allow virtual machines to have their memory stored encrypted on a hypervisor. That way the hypervisor can't gain visibility into what's being done on the virtual machine and access to the virtual machine's memory. So these are two new processor features for Intel and AMD processors that we have in tech preview. And the last one is creating nested virtual machines using KVM. So we now do hardware pass-through, and you can create virtual machines on top of virtual machines on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So tech previews are like the new stuff that we're working on that will hopefully go GA at some point in the future. Speaking of which, there's a big thing happening in the middle of 2025. That might be an excellent time for some of these features to go GA. But we also have the things we want to stop working on. So these are the deprecations. These both tech preview features and deprecations are noted in the 9.5 release notes. So if you've never seen them, I will link them in the video description as well, because these are just the ones that I thought were cool and interesting, but may not be the same as what you think is cool and interesting. So it's always a good idea when a new release comes out to review both the new things that we're working on so you can see some directionality, as well as what's really important, these deprecations. So deprecations are a mechanism that we use for notifying you that we don't want to do this anymore, that this is something that will likely be leaving the distribution. So for example, a new one that was added in RHEL 9.5 is Resilient Storage Add-on. Resilient Storage Add-on is a product that goes with RHEL, but is the GFS2 and clustered LVM software that we ship as an add-on to RHEL. So let's say that you're using Resilient Storage Add-on today. Are you freaking out? Maybe, but you don't need to, because while we say we don't want to do it anymore, deprecations are often executed on the next major release of RHEL. But that software is already included in RHEL today. So today's RHEL will still have it. So for example, resilient storage add-on, we may not see that in RHEL 10. But if you're using it today on RHEL 9, you'll continue to be able to use it on RHEL 9 for the next 7.5 years of RHEL 9's normal maintenance lifecycle. So there's plenty of time with deprecations to continue to operate on the version of RHEL that you're on today so that you can plan and make changes and move to a future version of RHEL where this technology may no longer be present. Another great example of that is Zorg and Zorg's framework friends like GTK2 and Motif. So we deprecated these things in RHEL 9. We actually have been working on Wayland for a long time, and it became the default graphical interface in RHEL 9. So Zorg was there in RHEL 8, and it's there in RHEL 9 as an alternative, but it's some future version. I expect Zorg will lead the distribution, and along with it go these non-Wayland compliant graphical frameworks like GTK2 and Motif. So if you have an application that is graphical and written using Motif, as an example, for your framework, you would want to port that to something different and make it compliant with Wayland in order to move to the next version of RHEL that maybe doesn't have these things. So that's coming. We're going to be removing Zorg and friends from the distribution at some point. Vert Manager is one that we deprecated in RHEL 8. So it's been on the deprecation list for a while. And also the monolithic libvirt. So we've converted libvirt to actually be a suite of systemd control daemons. That is still in there to do your virtualization library calls. But the monolithic libvirt is also on the deprecation list. So Vert Manager has been replaced by Cockpit Machines plugin. So if you're using the web console, the web-based administrative interface for RHEL, if you install the Cockpit Machines package, you'll get virtual machine management in there too. It's quite lovely. And for that reason, we don't feel the need to carry around Vert Manager anymore because Cockpit Machines does the same stuff. So in a future version of RHEL, that's not going to be there. So now's an excellent time to try out Cockpit Machines if you've not seen it before so that you're prepared for that change. The SCP protocol, not the command, the protocol. So SSH, OpenSSH has SSH, SCP, and SFTP as part of it. So what we've done with SCP is we're no longer going to use the SCP protocol when you're using the SCP command to transfer files back and forth between machines. Instead, the SCP command is going to use the SFTP transfer backend to actually take care of copying the file to and from the machine that you're targeting. So SCP protocol is leaving. The SCP command is certainly staying, but it's now going to actually transmit the files using SFTP. libdb. So this is a library to support DB formatted databases. If you don't use these, you don't have to worry about it. But if you do use these, there's plenty of other database things that you can use. We support MariaDB, MySQL, Postgres, Redis, and probably a few others I'm forgetting. All right, SHA-1 encryption is, man, that's old and crusty, and we're getting rid of it. cgroups v1. So cgroups is control groups. It's how we can limit the machine resources available to processes. So we started this in RHEL 7, but in RHEL 9, we moved to make cgroup 2 the default mechanism for this. In RHEL 8, cgroup 1 was the default and cgroup 2 was an option. And in 9, cgroup 2 is the default and cgroup 1 is an option. But going forward, we should see cgroups v1 removed entirely from the distribution. And so you can do things like limit the amount of memory that a process or process type can consume, limit the amount of CPU consumption a process can consume or a group of processes can consume. So that's something that's going to be secret version 1 is going to be something that's leaving the distribution at some point in the future. All right, but let's talk about specifically what's in 9.5. So, um, we started in 9.4. We have this tech preview thing called image mode. So image mode is the way of building Red Hat Enterprise Linux machines. It can be based off of a container file or Docker file. So if you know how to create a container using a container file, you can create a virtual machine now or a machine image using that technology. The secret is that we also pack in some bootloader components and kernel components so that instead of just a container of application layer stuff, you also have an operating system. What's cool about it is that you can then take the resulting image and you can lay it down as the foundation on bare metal. So you can boot it and run it as your operating system image. You can run it as a virtual machine, or you can still deploy it as a container. So if you want to run it somewhere else as a container, the kernel bits that are in there are just not executed. All the application layer bits are what's executed. So this is part of a like build once, deploy anywhere style of methodology. It uses a technology that we've been working around for a while called RPM OS tree for building the actual image, which is a immutable distribution tool. And you may have seen other immutable distributions from Red Hat over the years. But the big things with image mode are that you can pick what packages go into it. So you can use tools like Image Builder to create these images and choose what software goes into it. And because you're using Image Builder, you can also do stuff like add third-party repositories, create first boot instructions, do user editions, like all the same customizations you can make through Image Builder, you can build into the baking of your image mode image. But what's really cool is when it comes time for updates. So when it comes time for updates, you make a new image with all the updated things that you want and all the changes that you want. And then you deploy that to your bare metal or virtual machine. And then you boot into it. And now you're on the new image. And if you don't like it or something doesn't verify just right, you boot back to the old one again. So it's a way of doing atomic updates where you can revert to a previous version of the image that's available if something goes wonky. So this is like a really new style of managing RHEL that is still tech preview, but it's really interesting because think about like today we manage everything by applying packages, and there's like 300 packages that come in, and if something goes wrong, you have to figure out which one of those caused the issue, and then diagnose and troubleshoot it, and maybe roll back your package transaction. But with image mode, you just boot to the old image and then you try again to do your updated image when you're ready, right? So maybe it goes back to testing or development and you work on it again and then you deploy it again and boot into it and try it out and do your validation steps again. So it's a more like updating your phone operating system and less like maintaining hundreds or thousands of packages individually. All right. So I mentioned Image Builder when talking about image mode because that supports building image mode images currently in tech preview. But Image Builder itself has also gotten some changes. So if you've not seen Image Builder, it's a graphical tool that allows you to build operating system images. You can choose the format. So you can choose formats like a VMware VMDK file or an Amazon AMI or an Azure Virtual Hard Disk or an ISO image. And now you can also choose a WSL2 image. That's pretty cool for those of you who may be doing development on Windows. You can get a WSL2 image and boot it up and get RHEL on your Windows box. We also made some changes to Image Builder for those of you who work with security standards. So you can actually have Image Builder build a CIS level 2 benchmark compliant image for you. Or a DISA-STIG compliant image for you. And what that's going to do is make sure that the partitions are laid out in compliance with the standard, or I shouldn't say partitions, I should say file systems are laid out in compliance with the standard, but also things like your selection of software is going to be compliant with that standard as well. It's not going to completely do everything for that standard though, because there's some stuff that you have to do post build, right? You have to have processes and procedures documented and put in place for managing this machine after you roll it out there. That's a component of the benchmark and the security standards as well. So we can make with Image Builder all the install time choices that would be required, but then there's runtime choices that you'll still have to do because that's part of complying with the security standard as well. But not to worry, we still also ship OpenSCAP so that you can scan and make adjustments to that image as you see fit. The other change that we made to Image Builder is we can now do first boot startup scripts. So you can now put in scripting that when your machine is booting from its image for the very first time, it can run through and execute this series of scripting. So prior to this, we relied on things like Cloud for making any runtime changes to new machines. But now we have this additional opportunity to make changes to instances made off of a template that we built with Image Builder by using first boot scripts. All right, at Summit last year, or this year, when we released 9.4, we also announced that we're going to be working on a set of AI features to combine with RHEL. And we called that project RHEL Lightspeed. And we're starting to see some of those features land in things now. And so here's an example. In the Insights application of Image Builder. So if you log on to console.redhat.com and you go to the Image Builder application on console.redhat.com, you can build images using Image Builder. And now, one of the things that we'll do is make package suggestions. So you can see this screenshot that I pulled right here. We selected that we wanted to include RHEL10 in our image that comes out the other side of Image Builder. And there's this RHEL Lightspeed recommendation, this AI-based recommendation, that you might be interested in also adding the AD-CLI command or package, which is going to give you the AD command line interface, right? RHEL10 does all the Kerberos stuff. Kerberos is a component of Active Directory as well and is often used when registering your RHEL systems with your Active Directory infrastructure. So would you like to also add this very often added together package that allows you to do Active Directory command line stuff? So that's our AI augmentation starting to land the product. You'll see more of this landing in future releases of RHEL as well. All right. Just quickly on image mode, I mentioned very early that we also work with our ecosystem of partners. And so image mode should be interesting to those of you that are either hardware or ISV partners too. Because imagine that you can build an operating system image complete with your software included in it that gets managed as a container. So even though it can be put as bare metal or a virtual machine, all your stuff is in there and it's one thing, and your customer can deploy it as an actual machine or a container. And you, being the build of the image, knows exactly what's in there because you built it. All right, we're also doing some changes to our container tools. So we now have Podman Desktop AI Lab, which allows you to build AI models and use open source tools for working with AI stuff. So if you've not seen Podman Desktop before, it's pretty sweet. We actually support it on not only Linux, but also Mac OS and Windows. So it's a great graphical IDE for working with containers and applications in containers. All right. So what are we working on with AI augmentation? So we already saw the RHEL Lightspeed addition to Image Builder. There's going to be more of that kind of stuff. But also we're looking at these three areas for how we want to integrate AI into the RHEL product. One is we want to improve productivity and efficiency of people, right? And I think that that is an example might be providing guidance to someone who's doing a task. So we're going to be doing more of that kind of stuff. Stay tuned. Simplifying planning and administration. So looking at things like, hey, maybe you should use this TuneD profile instead of that TuneD profile. Or maybe you should do these things to better enhance your security versus those things. And then the other one, which we already saw in Image Builder, is extending expertise, right? So we know that people who use RHEL10 are doing AD stuff. And here's another thing. I noticed in the chat, Darth Vikes noticed this as well. Here's another thing that you might not have seen before, but might be interesting to you to check out. That's the kind of stuff that we're doing with our approach to AI augmentation in RHEL. All right, so also to help you operate your systems, we added a new system role for sudo. So if you've not seen system roles before, they're a collection of Ansible roles that are focused on performing system administration tasks. So there's things like managing your network configuration, or managing your time configuration, or managing the storage setup on your machine, or installing and configuring Microsoft SQL Server on your machine. So there's a whole bunch of these, but one that we added new was sudo system role. So now you can manage and deploy updates to your sudoers configuration across your system population. It is a sudo file role. So it works with like the sudoers file and manages that across multiple machines. It doesn't plug into any other central authentication services that you might be using. So if you're not doing central authentication, or you're not trying to use central authentication to manage your sudo, this is a great option to more centrally manage your sudoers. We also made a ton of changes to a bunch of other system roles, and you see them all listed here. For example, the storage system role actually now supports Stratus devices, whereas before it did not. It supported LVM and partition devices. So check out the release notes. There's a whole bunch of new options for the Podman system role for building and managing containers across a bunch of boxes. So I won't go into all the tedious details. But if you've never seen system roles before, down at the bottom is a link, lab.redhat.com /tracks/RHEL system roles. You can also find this on the main lab.redhat.com page. It actually has you apply a time configuration across several systems, performance profile information across several systems, and one other thing I've forgotten. So it uses a couple of different system roles together in tandem to create a standard operating environment, which you can then standardize across this population of boxes. All right, here's an example of what a system role looks like. This is an example based off the snapshot system role, which also got a couple of updates in the most recent 9.5 release. But essentially, the snapshot system role allows you to create LVM snapshots. And so you could run this system role, and across your population of systems, they can all snapshot a logical volume, and then you'll have it available as a snapshot across all these boxes. So it does things like creating snapshots, or dropping snapshots, or mounting them into the directory tree. And here in the actual Ansible playbook content that you see in that screenshot, what you see is a name, the host that it should be run on, and then this is the key part, the vars. The variables are actually what's provided by the role. And you can see down at the very bottom of the playbook is a list of roles that should be included and used by this playbook. So we included the RHEL system role snapshot role, and that's what allows us to then use these variables for doing stuff across our RHEL population. So we want to create a snapshot. That's what LVM snapshot, LVM action says. LVM set. So we're calling the snapshot. The volume. So we want to make a snapshot of a logical volume called app_lv. And that belongs to the app_vg volume group. And then the last part down there, the percentage space required, we can only perform this snapshot if there's 25% of free space available to perform the snapshot. If we have less than that, then we're not going to perform the snapshot. So it allows you to do some customization and some error checking before you perform the snapshot or try to access the snapshot. All right, so system roles, there's a lot of them now. And a bunch of them got updates with 9.5. So take a look at the release notes, which I'll also put into the meeting or the video notes to see what may have changed on your favorite RHEL system role. All right, we also did a Web console update. So I mentioned Web console earlier through the Cockpit Machines plugin that's replacing Vert Manager. But we also added the Cockpit Files plugin. And this is a graphical file browser included in the Cockpit Web Console interface. So it works like you would expect with a file browser. You can look around, you can navigate to different directories, you can even change permissions, you can move files around, you can rename files. But here's one that's really cool. Notice up here in the corner, the upload button. So realize that Web Console is you using a web browser to connect to a remote machine in order to manage it. And with the Cockpit Files plugin, you can take files from your local running machine and upload them to this remote machine that you're managing. So that's kind of cool. And I mean, we could also use something like SCP or SFTP to move those files around, but here's a graphical web-based way to move those files around. All right, a couple other things for our workloads friends. So RHEL is actually the preferred Linux for Microsoft SQL Server. That's kind of weird, right? You don't often think about Red Hat Enterprise Linux for Microsoft SQL Server, but turns out it does great. Um, Excellent performance, and it supports a whole bunch of stuff, and Microsoft supports it too. So SQL Server 2022 is now supported on both RHEL 8 and 9 as their base OS. That's also true for things like containers. So RHEL 8 and 9 containers are also supported. And then the other thing is that I mentioned system roles. There's an SQL Server system role that lets you install SQL Server automatically. And that now supports SQL Server 2022. For the developers, right? What's all the new stuff that we've been landing in the distribution? So this is something that we started with RHEL 7 through a technology called software collections. But basically, we will land new applications and runtimes into the distribution while it's going. So if it's been a while since you've seen RHEL and you remember it as being static, where you installed it and then 10 years from now it had the exact same stuff in it, that has not been true for quite some time. We now periodically land newer things in the distribution because some things move faster than others. So you might be very happy with an older version of Python because you want to write Python apps and you want them to work for a really long time. And we can do that. But you might be a Python developer that likes newer things because you're using newer libraries. And it turns out we can do that too. So in this release, we didn't land a newer Python, but we did land an updated Node.js, Rust, and Go. So Node, Rust, and Go tend to evolve very quickly. And every release or two, we tend to see an update to that because the language frameworks themselves evolve very quickly. And so we put newer versions in periodically. We also landed some updates to GCC. So GCC 11.5 is there, and the GCC toolset 14 is also available. Now, we didn't take out the older versions that we were shipping before. We just made these new ones there too. The other big change, and this is not a change in software, but is a change in behavior, is Java 17. So when RHEL 9 was originally released, if you installed Java, you got Java 11. And now with 9.5, if you install Java, you will get Java 17. We've actually had Java 17 in the release for a bit, but it will now be the default Java if you don't specify a version. Java 11 is still there. However, it is no longer maintained by Red Hat. So you won't be getting any more updates to Java 11. And it is our recommendation that you move to Java 17. That said, Java 17 does a tremendous amount of work to maintain backward compatibility with earlier versions of Java. So it's quite likely that your Java 11 based app that you've tested and know and love will work no problem with Java 17. All right, we also landed a newer version of Apache if you are into Apache and want a newer version of it. Then the last thing down there at the bottom, we did land some newer versions of PCP, Performance Copilot, Valgrind, which is a performance analytics tool for applications, and Grafana, which is a visualization application. So newer versions of those are also available in RHEL 9.5. All right, and then one of the big things that we landed was new version of Podman. So Podman 5 was released a bit ago. RHEL 9.5 actually ships with Podman 5.2. In RHEL 9.4, multi-arch build farms were a tech preview feature. That's now a GA feature. So that has been moved to be a GA feature, and you can use Podman to compile or to build containers that are not the same as the processor architecture you're running on. So you can be on a x86 64, but make containers for an ARM 64. The other things that we did are mostly not for RHEL people. So Podman is our preferred container tooling and is part of Podman Desktop. And Podman Desktop runs on Windows and Mac OS. And so the Podman team actually did a complete rewrite of Podman Machine so that when you're running those containers on other operating systems, they're now using the native hypervisors on those operating systems. So, for example, on people who are using Macs and Podman Desktop, when they build containers, they will be interacting with those containers using the native Apple hypervisor as opposed to something that we slap in there as a shim layer. So native support for other machine hypervisors in Podman Machine. We also support GPU pass-through with dash dash GPUs, which is helpful for things like the integrated Apple GPU that comes with your MacBook. The last thing applies to everybody, including us RHEL people. The rootless networking backend for Podman has been changed to the Pasta backend. So that replaces its previous backend. And the Pasta backend was chosen because it had better performance. So if you're running rootless containers, which is regular people running containers, you now use a networking backend called Pasta, and you may see some performance improvements on network throughput and a variety of other networking tasks. All right. This is actually not a feature, but something that we did recently. So Red Hat, as you all know, is an open source company, and just about everything we do is open source, and we make it available. So for example, Podman, if you go to podman.io, there's the Podman project, and it's on GitHub, and you can download the source code for it. But we've gone a step further. So for our container tooling, we are contributing Podman, Podman Desktop, and Bootsy, which is the technology that makes RHEL image mode um, usable. We're taking those three pieces of code and we contribute it to the Cloud Native Container Foundation for their sandbox. And that is the direction of providing wider access to the community for not only using these container tools, but also contributing to them. With this contribution, not only are we making the code available to Container Native Foundation, or Cloud Native Computing Foundation rather, but we're also providing the engineering resources to manage and maintain this for a period of time. So this is not only a win for the community of being able to have wider access to this software, but it's also reaffirming Red Hat's commitment to these technologies and putting some engineering resources towards continuing their evolution and maintenance, even though we are providing wider access to them. So continuing our legacy of open source, because everything we do is open source. All right, a couple other related technologies. So you may not have seen this, but if you're a satellite user, Satellite 616 dropped a bit ago. The big change is that Satellite 616 will allow RHEL 9 to be the satellite server machine, right? So you have a RHEL machine, you install satellite server software on top of it. Well, now you can have a RHEL 9 machine and install satellite server 616 on top of it. Satellite 616 is a simple content access managed subscription manager only. So we've moved everything to simple content access. Many of you probably haven't even noticed, but we did this a while ago on the Red Hat hosted subscription manager, and it's basically a different way so we don't have to manage individual machine subscriptions and individual repository subscriptions. So again, if you've not seen RHEL in a while and you maybe were working on RHEL 7, you might remember things like subscription pools and attaching repos. We don't do that anymore. We haven't done it since RHEL 8. Now, when you register a machine, you automatically get the base OS and AppStream repositories attached to it. If you want to customize those further, you can do so by using activation keys. So when your machines register, they get those two plus any others that are available in your account. So that's something that was enabled by simple content access, and that's now the default out there. Um, Online backups. So it used to be that you had to put your satellite server into some kind of maintenance in order to perform backups of it. That's no longer the case. You can now do online backups. And then they also did some updates to the container push mechanism. So you can, who knew? Satellite server could also be a container repository. So you can push new containers and manage them using container push. All right, as you may or may not know, all Red Hat Enterprise Linux subscriptions come with Red Hat Insights. Red Hat Insights is an available management tool for everyone that has a RHEL subscription, even developer subscriptions. So I think Insights has a reputation for being one of its tools. It's called Advisor. So you can register your machine and it will tell you, it'll scan your machine and look for things that we think may be problems, like a bonded interface that isn't set up quite right for your network. Or you're running SQL Server, but you don't have the SQL Server Tuned profile selected, which means your kernel tools may not be optimum for that workload. So Insights Advisor is there. But there are some other super money applications in Red Hat Insights. And so, for example, there's one called Vulnerability that does CVE reporting. So if you have a machine that is has some unmitigated CVEs, right, security vulnerabilities, the vulnerability tool will report on that. And you can even use it to remediate those systems. Now, realize that Red Hat will work really hard to close important and critical vulnerabilities. And in fact, when you look at extended lifecycle options, that's really what we provide is mitigation for critical and important CVEs. But there's a whole bunch of moderates or lows that may not be addressed. And traditionally, Red Hat just didn't show you CVEs that weren't addressed. But now with Insights, you can actually change some settings and you can see all of the CVEs, including those that don't have available mitigations from Red Hat. You can get a report of all of those. Now, Red Hat is still committed to providing remediations for important and critical, as rated by the vendor CVSS score. But you can now get a much broader report of what your estate looks like with CVEs using Insights. All right, we've also been working on integration. So you can now, Insights can now integrate with CrowdStrike and Vulkan if you're using those in your population too. And then one that I'm kind of excited about, you can export your inventory. So one of the nice things about Insights is it provides you this list of machines that are registered that you can manage and do stuff with. But now you can export that into a file and then work with it further offline. So things like inventory tracking. Now you don't just have to rely on a web-based tool. You can actually export that and have snapshots of it and kind of see how your population has changed by comparing a snapshot from before to now and other stuff. So exporting system inventory into a document is handy. All right. So that's the features for 9.5. The last little bit is a little bit on product lifecycle. So with 9.5, we actually put into practice our first change to how we approach minor release betas with RHEL. So prior to 9.5, we actually had about a 6-week period where we would publish a beta and you could navigate to download it in the customer portal and you get an ISO and you can install it. With 9.5, we stopped doing that. You can still subscribe your machine to the beta channel of RPMs, and you can access beta software that way. So you can take a 9.4 box and actually update it to be a 9.5 beta. But we stopped making install media and a variety of other assets. That's because a lot of people weren't using it. So we said, why should we continue this work when it's not really being used? So for minor release betas, we're not going to produce a big pile of assets for people to use during this 6 week, which is really a relatively short period to evaluate and use the beta. That will not be the change or not be the case for major releases. So for example, we recently released RHEL10 Beta. You can go to the customer portal and download RHEL10 install media and try out RHEL10 Beta software. So majors are not affected by this change. It's only minor releases. All right, so what are we currently doing with different RHEL releases? RHEL 7 is no longer in its standard 10-year life cycle. It is now outside of that. And if you want to get critical and important security updates, you need to get an extended lifecycle support add-on. So it's an additional thing that you buy from Red Hat, and you subscribe your machines to an additional channel of software, and we will continue to publish critical and important security errata to those systems. But you have to have the add-on, and the systems have to be subscribed to the right repository to get it. We're going to do that for 4 years. So we're roughly half a year into it. Well, maybe not even that much, but we still got time for that one. But it's now in that out of normal maintenance. You have to have this special add-on to continue to get updated packages lifecycle for RHEL 7. For RHEL 8, we're here. 8.10. It actually was released in mid 2024, and it is now in the last 5 years of its life cycle, which we call maintenance phase. So you can see that we're stepping up with all these minors periodically, and now on RHEL 8.10, it's just a line. Not expecting any new minor releases of RHEL 8. It will continue to be 8.10 for the remainder of its 10-year life cycle, which is roughly 4.5 more years. And during that time, you should expect critical and important security updates, but not a whole lot else in terms of updates on this operating system. There might be a couple of bug fixes that sneak through now and again, but primarily it's critical and important security errata. All right, RHEL 9, we're actually only halfway through, right? 9.5, that's what we released and what you're watching information about now. So 9.5 is this little short red line here in the middle of the page. 9.5 is a 6-month release. So in another few months, we will get 9.6, and 9.5 support will stop. You'll notice that 9.6 has a much longer line with different colors, and 9.4 was a much longer line with different colors. So during this period of support, you get updates and security updates and bug fixes and other stuff that lands. But after 9.6 comes out, that's it. We're done with 9.5. But with 9.4, right, when 9.5 came out, we were done with 9.4, except if you had the extended update support add-on or the enhanced extended update support add-on. If you have either of those add-ons, you can stay on 9.4 for another 18 months if it's the extended update support add-on, or another 3.5 years if it's the enhanced extended update support add-on, where during those extended update support periods, you get critical and important security errata targeted for that dot release. So 9.4, if you have EUS or enhanced EUS add-ons and you subscribe to the right channels, you will continue to get security, critical and important security errata for those machines. 9.5, there is no extended update support for it. So your next extended update release will be 9.6 if you have those special channels of software. RHEL 10, it's coming. So this is kind of the signpost, the indicators of what it means to be RHEL 10. So we know that every 3 years, there's a new major release of RHEL. And RHEL 9 was released in 2022. So RHEL 10, we should expect in the middle of 2025. That's just next year. So to lead up to that, what you'll notice is we'll do things like create CentOS Stream 10. CentOS Stream is the upstream for RHEL, and so we have to have that first before we start doing the RHEL work. So you'll see publication of CentOS Stream 10, which has already happened. Then you'll see a beta published, and that also just happened. So RHEL10 Beta is available now. You can go to Customer Portal and download install media, or one of my fellow teammates created a sandbox lab for it on redhat.com, on lab.redhat.com. So I'll put the link to it in our video description. So you can just use the web page and we'll provision a virtual guest for you, and you can try it out and see what's new or different or largely the same as RHEL 9. And we'll keep it updated throughout beta, or you can access the updated software through beta that way. And then you don't have to provide a machine and download install media and go through the installer. We've already done that for you. All right. And then RHEL10 Beta, that's going to be a several month process. We're actually going to be kicking off a RHEL10 Beta YouTube series. So look out for that. And if you subscribe, you'll actually get notified when we start publishing these events. We'll be doing a RHEL10 Beta series, and that's going to work us towards RHEL10 GA, which will be released in mid 2025. All right, a couple of things I mentioned. Lab.redhat.com. If you've not seen this before, me and my team have written hands-on, self-paced exercises for doing different things on RHEL. So we provision one or more virtual machines for you, and you can try out something like, in this case, the screenshot is showing Podman, but there's also one for image mode. There's ones for security technologies like FA Policy D, which is application whitelisting. There's ones for system roles. I talked about that one earlier. So there's tons of hands-on, free to access lab content for Red Hat or for RHEL. All right. Also, you came here probably because you already have seen one of our other shows. So right now, RHEL Presents is on pause because we're looking for a new host, but that may be coming back once we hire a new person on the team. And then Into the Terminal is pretty much every Friday at 12 noon Eastern time, and is focused on system administration and Linux skills. All right. So that's it for 9.5. Darth Vikes, always a pleasure to see you. And anybody who is watching and has additional questions, please feel free to drop a comment on the video. I will go ahead and respond to those as well. And thank you for your time today.